When you have the motive to tell a story, maybe you will push yourself to live a more crazy story.
We're studying storytelling at Antonelli Art School, and I'm so excited to welcome my friend and the incredible artist and illustrator, Sofie Engstrom von Alten. Welcome, Sofie.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Well, I just like any opportunity I get to show off your fun, playful, exuberant style and all of the amazing stories. You are super prolific, I must say, as a zine maker, book illustrator. So tell us a little bit about your background, your story as an artist.
Okay, so I grew up in San Francisco and I went to a French American international school. So I grew up around a lot of different cultures, and my parents also loved to travel. So we went all over the place when I was very young. I think one of the first stories I ever illustrated was when I decided to take a long hitchhiking trip from Berlin down into Eastern Europe. And that ended up being a 3-month-long adventure. I kind of just had a journal with me the whole time, just recording thoughts and taking notes and drawing things that I would see and my observations. And once I arrived in Istanbul, I opened my notebook and just realized how much content I had. And so it was kind of a way of processing things. I started first by making a map because that was kind of like the larger context of the whole thing.
Orienting yourself.
Yeah, and then a lot of the content of that book was just kind of observing like how the culture shifts as we move eastward. And so maybe kind of like bizarre things that people wouldn't normally notice, or just unique things that I saw, remnants of history. That was my first illustrated book.
Does it change your experience of traveling when you do that processing through your sketchbook?
I find that journaling and drawing are very, very important for me, just as a processing tool. And as an introvert, it's kind of like how I recharge. So I try to do it all the time anyway. But yes, I would say that it does kind of change the path of a traveler's journey, because when you have the motive to tell a story, maybe you will push yourself to live a more crazy story.
Yeah, take the more interesting path instead of just the usual tourist destinations. We have many different people interested in children's book illustration too, and that's something I know you've dipped your hand into. So what is the story of becoming a children's book illustrator?
Dino Does Yoga is the only children's book that I have created in the past few years that's been published by an official publisher. I illustrate lots and lots of books, and actually one of them has been picked up by Penguin before, but this one is the only one that's been produced and it's out in the world. And I think that it was kind of a perfect storm how this book got created, because as I said, I'm an introvert and I was living by myself. I was taking care of my mom's home. So she was in India on a business trip and I was living alone, and I love yoga. So I was doing it just on my own. I got the inspiration to somehow make yoga kind of funny. And I guess my sense of humor is kind of childish and like parody. I was just in this graphic design class one day and I started drawing, and I drew a creepy T-Rex doing a side plank. And I was like, this is so good. Like, it's so cute, and it's like two opposite things. But you could argue that yoga is very ancient as well as dinosaurs. So then after that, I had a lot of fun with it. I dove into it. I didn't even really plan to have it be published from the get-go. So I was kind of trying to figure out how I could produce it by myself. And I was already making zines, which are just like small paper, like kind of handmade books. So the plan was kind of to go forward that way. And so I kind of like dumbed down the design, but ended up basically checking out a bunch of anatomy books from the library and then meshing them with a T-Rex anatomy. So in the end, I had this entire body, front and back, of a little T-Rex and his like pectoral muscles and the trapezius and all the different parts. And in the original version of this book, one page would be Dino doing a yoga pose, and the facing page would be that same pose, but with the muscles that you're using highlighted.
Nice.
So it's supposed to be like scientific, like teaching kids about their muscles.
And helping them identify with their inner T-Rex. Strong in the What I'm hearing is that the moments where you kind of giggled and stopped and realized you were having a good time with the illustrations and the kind of process of creation and discovery was a big guiding light in how you moved forward.
Totally. Yeah, like all of my stories have been created through some sort of inspiration or passion. And I believe that you really need to be interested in what you're making. After taking almost 100 client projects at this point, I can definitely say that following your dream will keep you energized.
Once you had the book illustrated, did you send it out to different publishers to find out, if it would hook? Or what's that process like?
Yeah, that process was very long. I ended up checking out the Writer's Market book, and they publish a new edition every year. So the one I got was like 2017, and it was like this thick. It was huge. They list thousands and thousands of publishers of any sort of content anywhere in the world. I got that book again at the library, which is like the mecca for resources and inspiration and reference. When I found this book, it took me a couple weeks, but I went through and I kind of searched for every keyword that had to do with my book, which was like children's and yoga and dinosaurs and wellness. And I maybe had like 20 keywords, and I narrowed it down to about 50 publishers. And from there, I went onto their websites and started researching each publishing house, because each publisher has their own requirements for like what they want to see when you submit a book. I have since learned that this is not really the normal way to do it, but I had printed like 50 copies of Dino, just like a little zine that I had made, and I stuck them in the mail and mailed them to like all the publishers. After that, the rejection letters started coming in one after the other. So you kind of have to just be okay with that, because it's going to happen. If you try anything new, there's going to be problems. But in the end, Penguin, Random House, and North Atlantic Books, Berkeley, ended up buying the manuscript. It was exciting. Looking back now, because I had to change so much of the content to fit with their vision, I don't know if I would recommend that for everybody, but it's definitely an avenue if you want to create your idea and then just walk away from it and not deal with like paying for the production.
As opposed to self-publishing where all of that kind of work is on you. Big decisions, right, quality checks, and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And how about zines? You have so many fabulous, gorgeous zines, mostly reflecting your travel. I love your San Miguel coloring book, is one many of our San Miguel lovers would enjoy, I'm sure. What do you normally do to produce those whenever you create a zine?
So I have kind of a strange system, because I print everything like at the local print shop. So it takes a little bit of planning to get all the pages to line up correctly. But basically what I usually do is I'll make a tiny mock-up of the book. Using that little mock-up of like maybe 8 tiny folded pages that are numbered, I will be able to reference that and place the images in the correct order. And then I just get them printed in town. And yeah, the inspiration for the San Miguel book definitely came from the area, the beauty of this area, and then also wanting to provide some sort of like Spanish immersion so that people wouldn't feel so afraid of Spanish or English. Like they'd feel more invited to speak.
Love it. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of your insights and adventures. And any last advice for people as far as the process of turning stories into art?
If you want to really have a structured traditional story, to first develop a character and a moral or a kind of like goal.
Glad you mentioned that, because that is something I love in a lot of your, I guess you don't print them and make them zines, but like your webcomic style stuff, like the Smokey the Bear or the conspiracy comics that you create. There's, yeah, I guess it's got like either a moral or a punchline. Do you sort of have the punchline or the story or the moral in your head when you get started and you kind of just let it flow to get there? Or do you have it all storyboarded out?
When I create comics just for myself or for my Patreon page, I usually have the beginning and the end figured out, and then I just kind of go with it for the middle part. And it usually works out.
Love it. What's so inspiring about your storytelling technique is that you are going on an adventure. It's like a mystery even to you. So it's this surprising discovery zone. And so that fun and playfulness definitely comes out in the finished work. It's a joy to read. Thank you so much for sharing your story and your storytelling tips.
Thank you.